She was 3 seconds from saying, "I do," to a man she despised. When the doors flew open and the most dangerous man in Seoul locked eyes with her like he'd been looking for her his entire life. The morning of Mary's wedding smelled like gardenias and regret. She stood in front of the cracked mirror in the church dressing room, staring at a version of herself she didn't recognize. White dress, pressed curls, red lipstick someone else had chosen. She looked like a bride. She felt like a hostage. "You look beautiful," her mother whispered from the corner, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Mary said nothing. Beautiful wasn't the word she'd use. Outside, she could hear the guests settling into pews. Her father's business associates, men in expensive suits who laughed too loud and said too little. And somewhere out there, waiting at the altar, was Victor Mensa, 43 years old, wealthy, well-connected, and the man her father had essentially sold her to in exchange for cleared debts and a handshake. She gripped the bouquet until her knuckles ached. 3 months ago, I was just a waitress, she thought. I was fine. I was free. Across the city, in a glass-walled office 30 floors above Seoul's financial district, Kang sat in silence. He was the kind of man rooms adjusted to. When he entered, voices dropped, shoulders stiffened. Even the air seemed to make room for him. He wore no tie. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, a thin scar running along his left forearm, a reminder of who he was before the empire. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. His eyes were fixed on a single photograph laid flat on his desk. A woman, laughing. Caught mid-motion, tray in hand. "I get a rooftop restaurant event 3 weeks ago." She didn't know anyone had taken it. His second-in-command, Ji-hoon, stepped in. "Boss, the wedding is in 2 hours." Kang picked up the photograph. "I know," he said quietly. Ji-hoon hesitated. "Are we going?" Kang stood, buttoned his jacket, and slid the photo into his breast pocket, right over his heart. "We're going." If someone showed up to stop your forced wedding, what would your first reaction be? Like shock, relief, or something else? Drop it in the comments. The organ music swelled. Mary walked down the aisle on her father's arm, eyes forward, jaw set. She counted the steps like a prisoner counting bars. 12, 11, 10. Victor stood at the altar in a gray suit, watching her with the quiet satisfaction of a man receiving a package he'd already paid for. She hated that look. 9, 8, 7. The doors slammed open. Not a gentle push, not a polite entrance. They exploded inward like something had been waiting behind them with fury. The organ stuttered. Gasps rippled through the pews. Mary's father froze mid-step, and then he walked in. Kang, 6 feet of controlled danger in a black suit, 3 men flanking him like shadows. He moved like the room belonged to him. Slow, deliberate, utterly unbothered by the 200 people staring with open mouths. His eyes swept the room once. Then they found Mary, and they stopped. Mary's breath caught somewhere between her throat and her chest. She didn't know this man. She had never seen this man. But the way he looked at her, not like a prize, not like a possession, like someone who had been searching through a crowd for a very long time and had finally found what he came for. It unraveled something in her. Victor stepped forward, voice sharp. "Who are you? This is a private ceremony." "It was," Kang said simply. His voice was low, accented, and absolutely certain. He didn't even look at Victor. His eyes hadn't left Mary. "It's over now." The silence was catastrophic. Mary's father sputtered. "Do you have any idea who I—" "Yes." Kang finally looked at him, and whatever her father saw in that gaze made him go very, very quiet. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Adeyemi. And I know what this wedding actually is." He tilted his head slightly. "She's not a debt. Mary's bouquet trembled in her hands. Kang looked back at her. Just her. And in a voice only she could hear, he said, "You don't have to do this." The world had stopped making sense. Mary stood at the altar, bouquet in hand, a stranger at the door, and every eye in the church drilling into her like she owed them an answer. "Move," she told herself. "Say something. Do something." She turned to Victor. His jaw was tight, a vein pulsing at his temple. He was a man who didn't lose things. And right now, something was slipping. She could see it. "Mary." Her father's voice was a warning wrapped in silk. "Don't." And that one word, "don't," was what broke her open. She stepped back from the altar. "Mary," her mother gasped. Victor reached for her arm. "This is embarrassing. Let's just... Don't touch me." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. She looked at her own hand like it belonged to someone braver. Then she looked up at Kang, still standing at the back of the church like a dark, immovable fact. She didn't trust him. How could she? He was a stranger. But he could be dangerous. He probably was dangerous. The way his men stood around him said everything about the world he came from. But Victor's hand on her arm said everything about the world she was being pushed into. She pulled free. "I need air," she said to no one in particular, and walked. Not toward Kang, not toward her father, but toward the side door, the one that led to the small garden where she'd sat this morning and cried into her coffee. She pushed through it alone. Outside, the air hit her like cold water. She pressed her back against the stone wall, chest heaving, dress pooling around her feet. 30 seconds passed. Then she heard footsteps. She looked up. It was Kang. No jacket now. He'd left it inside. Just a white dress shirt, sleeves still rolled. He stopped a respectful distance away, hands in his pockets, and said nothing. She stared at him. "Why?" she finally asked. He met her eyes. Because no one else was going to. She wanted to argue. She wanted to demand more. A name, a reason, a full explanation with receipts. Instead, what came out was quieter, rawer than she intended. "Who are you?" His name was Kang Jun-seo. That was all he gave her for the first 5 minutes. A name and a black SUV idling at the church's side gate, engine running like it had been waiting. "I'm not getting in that car," Mary said flatly. "Your father's security is coming through the front entrance." He checked his watch without urgency. "You have about 90 seconds to decide." She hated that he was right. She got the car. The drive was silent at first, city noise bleeding through tinted windows, Ji-hoon navigating without being told where to go. Mary sat pressed against the door, arms crossed, watching Kang from the corner of her eye. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't try to fill the silence with charm or explanation. He just sat there, calm as a man who had already decided how this day would go. It infuriated her. "You can't just kidnap someone from their wedding," she said. "You walked out on your own. Because you caused a scene. Would you have preferred I didn't?" She opened her mouth, closed it. He almost smiled. Almost. The car pulled up to a sleek high-rise, not a hotel, something more private. A residence. Mary stepped out onto the marble forecourt and turned to face him, chin raised. "I want answers, real ones. Not whatever smooth-talking nonsense you're about to..." "Third floor," he said quietly. "There's food, clothes, and a room with a lock you control. No one will touch you. No one will enter without your permission." He held her gaze. "You're not a prisoner, Mary." She froze. "I never told you my name." Something shifted in his expression, just briefly, a crack in the composure. "I know," he said. She searched his face, really searched it, and found something she hadn't expected in a man like him. Guilt. She followed him inside. The apartment was too quiet for a man who ran a criminal empire. No loud music, no entourage lounging around, just clean lines, low lighting, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of green tea. Mary sat at the island counter, still in her wedding dress, sleeves pushed up, hands wrapped around a warm mug like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Kang sat across from her. She'd asked for the truth. He'd said he would give it. So she waited. Yeah, 3 weeks ago, he began, you worked a rooftop event, the Lim Industries anniversary dinner. She nodded slowly. She remembered it. Rich crowd, terrible tippers, one guest who'd knocked a full tray out of her hands and didn't apologize. I was there. He paused. You were the one who picked up every glass yourself. Didn't call for help, didn't cry, just got on your knees in that uniform and picked every piece up with your bare hands. Mary said nothing. One of my men laughed. Kang's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I sent him home. She stared at him. You were watching me. I couldn't stop. His voice was quiet, unashamed. I looked into who you were afterward. That's when I found out about your father's debt. About Victor. About the wedding. Mary's fingers tightened around the mug. So what? You ran a background check on a waitress. I needed to know you were real. The words landed strange and soft, like something he hadn't meant to say out loud. She looked away first. My mother did everything right, she said after a moment, voice low. Married the right man, smiled at the right people, spent her whole life making herself small enough to fit into someone else's plan. She laughed, a short, hollow sound. And I swore I'd never be that. Then my father lost everything gambling, and suddenly my freedom was the only asset he had left. The room held the weight of that. Kang looked at her, really looked, and said nothing. But his hand moved across the counter. Not grabbing, not pushing, just resting close to hers, an inch away. She didn't move her hand either. Now, at what point in this story did you start rooting for Kang? Was it the church, the car, or right now? Tell us below that we're reading every comment. It started with food. Kang had ordered quietly, someone had left containers outside the door without knocking, and he'd brought them in without ceremony. Korean fried chicken, steamed rice, something that smelled like garlic in heaven. Mary hadn't eaten since yesterday. She didn't want to admit that. But when he pushed a container toward her without a word, she ate. And somewhere between the first and second piece of chicken, the wedding dress started feeling less like a cage and more like a costume she could eventually take off. You eat like you're angry at the food, he observed. She looked up. Excuse me? Fast, focused, like it wronged you personally. She blinked and then laughed. Actually laughed. It surprised them both. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning, she admitted. His expression darkened slightly. He couldn't even feed you properly before the wedding. My father was too busy managing the guest list. She said it sarcastically, but it came out wounded. Kang was quiet for a moment. Then, tell me something about yourself. Something no one at that wedding knew. She tilted her head. Why? Because everyone there knew Mary the debt. I want to know Mary. Something in her chest pulled tight. She thought for a moment. I paint, she said softly. Late at night when I can't sleep. Abstract stuff, mostly just color and chaos. I've never shown anyone. Why not? Because the moment you show people what you love, they find a way to use it against you. He looked at her for a long beat. I understand that. And she believed him completely. They talked until the city outside went dark, about small things, strange things. She learned he hated silence, but had learned to live in it. He learned she could navigate any city on foot, but had never left Lagos. She told him about her grandmother's laugh. He told her about a dog he'd had at 13 before everything changed. At some point, the distance between them on the couch had quietly disappeared. She fell asleep mid-sentence, her head tilting toward his shoulder. He didn't move. He sat completely still, like she was something he was terrified to disturb. She woke up to voices. Loud, sharp, the kind of Korean that didn't need translation to understand it was an argument. Mary straightened up on the couch, disoriented, daylight cutting through the blinds. Kang was across the room, phone pressed to his ear, back turned. His posture had changed completely. Shoulders rigid, the softness of last night completely gone. He was speaking in clipped, controlled tones that somehow felt more violent than shouting. Ji-hoon stood near the door, avoiding her eyes. That was the first sign. She stood, smoothing the wrinkled dress. What's happening? Ji-hoon hesitated 1 second too long. She walked past him and picked up the tablet sitting face up on the kitchen counter. It was open to a news article, local Lagos gossip blog, posted 40 minutes ago, with a headline that hit her like cold water. Mafia boss Kang Jun-seo's mystery woman. Sources say a Daemi girl was targeted months ago. She read it, then read it again. Do sources close to the Korean underworld suggest the interruption was not impulsive? Kang had been monitoring Mary Adeyemi for weeks, part of a long-running strategy to destabilize Victor Mensa's business network through personal leverage. Personal leverage. The mug she'd used last night was still on the counter. The containers from dinner were still stacked neatly beside it. The indent on the couch cushion where she'd fallen asleep against his shoulder was still visible. Personal leverage. Kang ended the call, turned around, saw her face and the tablet in her hands. Mary, was I a strategy? Her voice was frighteningly calm. No, listen to me. Did you interrupt that wedding because of Victor? Because of some business thing between you two? She set the tablet down carefully, like if she gripped it any harder, she'd throw it. Answer me, Kang. It started that way, he said. The room went ice cold. It started that way. She repeated it slowly, tasting every word. So I was a plan. I was a move on your little criminal chessboard, and you just... What, felt bad somewhere along the way? Mary, don't. Her voice finally cracked, just once. Don't say my name like you know me. She grabbed her shoes and walked out the door. Mary walked for 40 minutes before her feet gave out. She sat on the steps of a closed pharmacy 3 streets from the high-rise, wedding dress pooling around her on the concrete, heels in her hand. People stared. She didn't care. Let them stare. Let the whole city see a bride sitting on dirty steps in a wrinkled dress. At least this version of her had walked out on her own terms. Both times. She pressed her palms against her eyes. Personal leverage. The words kept looping, but underneath them something more honest kept surfacing. The way he'd sent his man home for laughing at her. The way he'd pushed food toward her without making it a gesture. The way he'd sat completely still for hours just so she could sleep undisturbed. People didn't do that for leverage. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She rejected it. It buzzed again. She rejected it again. The third time she answered. I swear, if this is my father... It's Ji-hoon. A pause. Please don't hang up. She said nothing. That was permission enough. The article was planted by Victor's people. Ji-hoon said quietly. They've been watching since yesterday. The leverage angle? That was the original mission briefing, yes. 6 weeks ago. Another pause. He canceled it 4 weeks ago, Ms. Adeyemi. How in the moment he came back from that rooftop dinner? His voice was careful, deliberate. I have never seen him cancel anything. Not once in 7 years. Mary stared at the ground between her feet. He's not going to call you, Ji-hoon continued. That's not... He doesn't do that. he doesn't chase, he doesn't explain himself to anyone. A long beat. He's been standing outside this building for 30 minutes. Her head snapped up. She looked down the street. And there he was, Kang, no jacket, hands in his pockets. Standing at the corner like he had no intention of moving, but also no intention of coming closer. Like he decided that showing up was all he was allowed, and the rest was entirely hers. Their eyes met across the distance. He didn't move. Neither did she. Not yet. She stood up slowly. The concrete had left marks on the back of her dress. Her hair had come a half undone. She was barefoot on a Lagos street in a wedding gown, holding her heels in one hand, and she probably looked absolutely insane. She walked toward him anyway. He watched her come. That same stillness from the church, from the car, from every moment since he'd walked through those doors. Like he'd trained himself to be unmovable so that other people could fall apart safely near him. She stopped 2 feet away. "You stood outside for 30 minutes, she said. 34, he corrected quietly. And you weren't going to come in? No. Why? He looked at her with those steady, serious eyes. Because you didn't walk out of that church for me, Mary. You walked out for yourself. Everything after that," he paused, "has to be your choice. All of it. I'm done making decisions that belong to you." Something cracked open in her chest. Wide and warm and terrifying. "You're a dangerous man," she said. "Yes. Your world is complicated. Deeply. And you watched me pick up broken glass off a floor and decided that was the woman you wanted?" Something moved behind his eyes, soft and certain at once. "I watched you pick up broken glass off a floor and refused to let anyone see you bleed. And I thought," his voice dropped, "I have never wanted to be trusted by anyone the way I want to be trusted by her." Mary exhaled. She closed the remaining distance between them, reached up and pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over the breast pocket where she didn't yet know a photograph of her lived. She felt his heartbeat. It wasn't calm at all. "I paint at night," she said softly. "I'm terrible in the mornings. I cry at documentaries about animals, and I will never, ever apologize for it." She looked up at him. "If you're going to know me, know that me." Kang looked down at her hand on his chest. Then he covered it with his own. "Show me," he said simply. And right there, barefoot on a Lagos street, in a dress meant for someone else's ending, Mary Adeyemi found her own beginning. The city moved around them like it always had, but something had shifted. Something that had no name yet. Something that felt, for the very first time, like it was entirely hers. Mary walked out twice. Once from the wedding, once from Kang, but came back on her own terms. Which moment hit you hardest? And would you have walked back toward him? Drop your answer below. Let's talk about it.